about going through challenges all the time, Grant.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, there's ups and downs. As parents, you're going to have different times with your kids that are going to be better than others with just what we're dealing with in life as a whole. But one thing that will make you better suited towards being able to deal with that is if you got a resilient mindset to know that whatever you're going through, what is the lesson I'm going to get out of it, and how is it going to make me better?
Hey, what's up, friends? Grant Baldwin here. Welcome back to the Speaker Lab podcast. Today, hanging out with Tiran Jackson, and this is going to be a doozy. This is going to be a good one for a variety of different reasons here. So buckle up. We're going to go on a roller coaster of an adventure today. Tiran, how you doing, man? Good to hang out with you today.
Man, I'm doing great, Grant. How about yourself, man?
I'm doing awesome. I'm excited to chat with you. You've had an insane story, which we will cover and dig into. But first of all, to kind of set the stage, why don't you tell us a little bit about your speaking business as of today? We're recording this in early 2025. Like, what's business look like? Who are you speaking to? How much are you speaking? What do you speak about? And then we'll kind of dig in from there.
Yeah, no problem. So business is looking good for me. I'm speaking to a lot of different audiences and crowds, but however, I am specific on what I'm doing. I speak to leadership teams, to sales groups and organizations. Sometimes I speak to church and faith-based opportunities, and I even speak to NFL teams, believe it or not. So I got a wide variety of clients, but what I'm finding is my central theme, and I talk about resilience and overcoming obstacles, and I help by going through, well, we'll talk about with my story, but just the steps on how to be able to deal with adversity and be able to overcome those times and use that adversity to create positive growth in your lives, in your careers, in whatever area that you're moving forward in.
And so how much are you speaking right now? Like, how many gigs are you typically doing on a year?
I'm doing about 5 or 6 per month right now.
Okay.
Which is actually pretty good. And so, I realize that the more that I speak, the more opportunities are coming to me to speak.
Yeah.
Which is something that's a valuable thing. And, getting that momentum is one of the biggest things that I think we can do. But once we get that momentum, just trying to keep it going is one of the most powerful aspects I've seen to help my business start to flourish.
Yeah, one of the lines that you just said there is a line that I've heard before, and we beat that drum a lot of just saying the more you speak, the more you speak. It is very much a flywheel. It's momentum. And that once you start speaking, it's easy to like pick up additional gigs and spin off business and repeat and word of mouth, and people have seen you. But initially, just trying to get the ball rolling, it feels like you're pushing this boulder uphill. So how long have you been, to get to doing, 5, 6 a month, you're doing, 50, 60, 70 a year is no joke. How long has it taken you to get to that point?
It's actually, I've been speaking for about 5 years now. And
Okay.
I never thought I was going to be a speaker. That was not the path that I thought I was going down. But once I actually got into it and started going through, I guess, the initial learning process, the growing pains associated with it, and started to figure out exactly who my messaging is for, it made it easier for me to know how to find who the right people to go after in order to get more of these opportunities. And so over the course of the past 2 years, it had been maybe about 1 or 2 times a month. But I've really seen now that we're in this space where like I said, speaking more has gotten me more opportunities on podcasts like this, on stages, on interviews. And I'm seeing really the fruits of that labor starting to come to where I'm getting more and more opportunities. So now, like I said, it's just about, finding the right opportunities and capitalizing off of them.
Yeah, let's jump into your story because, and actually tell you what, actually before we get there, but prior to all of this, okay, even prior to this story, because there is kind of like this, there's like a before Tiran and an after Tiran moment, okay, which again, we're going to get to. I'm not trying to tease it out or anything, but we'll get to that. What were you doing professionally prior to all of this?
So I went to college to be an engineer. I thought I was going to be an engineer all my life. I went to undergrad at Tennessee State University. I got a degree in mechanical engineering. Started working for Rolls-Royce, believe it or not. I was designing components and doing things for gas turbine engines and moved in different places. Worked for GE, moved to Atlanta, got another opportunity, went to Georgia Tech, got a master's degree. I thought that was what I was going to be doing as being an engineer. And so that was what my career was like up until that point. My wife at the time, she went from being a school teacher in Goodlettsville, right outside of Nashville, and everything, and then moved into accounting and then moved into HR. And she was actually HR director for a Fortune 500 company. And we were just moving up the ladder. We were very ambitious. We had big plans, big goals, and thought that our careers were moving down the path where they were. before anything ever changed in my life. So
Yeah. And so even at that point, before anything changed, like at that point, was speaking anywhere on your radar? Had this ever been something you'd even considered?
it was nothing on my radar. Had no thoughts of it whatsoever. I was used to doing presentations on technical content and going and speaking for different, companies, vendors, things of that nature, but nothing professionally. That was
Yeah,
not
yeah.
what I was thinking about. So my goal was to go up and be the director of engineering of somebody's company at that time and stay corporate in that fashion.
All right. So we've been kind of teasing this, but talk us through it. Like, what was the moment that changed everything for you?
So the moment that changed everything, I take you guys back to 2018. My wife Malika and I, we were getting ready to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary. And the day before we went, I actually drove up to Nashville, dropped our son off, and told him, "Don't worry, son, I'll be back in a week to pick you up." He was staying with his aunt and uncle, and he knew mom and dad were going on vacation and that everything was going to be fine. He was doing the things that you do when you're away from your parents. He was with his aunt and uncle. He was going to terrorize his cousins, stay up late, eat ice cream, all of these things that you can't do when mom and dad are around. So the next day, I drove back to Atlanta. Malika and I, we flew to the Bahamas for what was supposed to be 5 days in paradise. First 2 days were great. We had time at the beach, fruity drinks, time at the pool. Everything was great. On the third day, we decided to do an excursion, to leave the resort and go and tour the island because at this particular island, they had this attraction where you go swim with the pigs.
Yeah.
Malika wanted to do. So we got up that morning. We went to this marina thinking that we were going to spend a couple hours out there and enjoy part of what people do on vacation. We got to the marina. We took off at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at 9:05, my life changed forever. At 9:05, unbeknownst to us, there was a fuel leak that was emanating from the fuel tank of this small boat. And as a result of that fuel leak, something created a spark. The next thing I knew, I was waking up face down on the surface of a burning boat. I was waking up because my right leg was literally on fire. I could glance down at my left foot. I saw my left foot dangling, my ankle bone out, blood rushing. And now there happened to be a second boat that took off around the same time that we did. And the passengers on this boat were yelling at me, "Get off the boat, get off the boat." Now, I was trying to push myself up, but I crumbled. I pushed myself up again. Now, I didn't know it at the time, Grant, but I had a broken collarbone, bruised ribs, fractured pelvis, fractured vertebrae, third-degree burns on my right leg, a broken right foot, and as I said, my left foot was dangling, and blood was gushing out. And the only thing that I could do to help myself at that moment was take my right hand, reach my arm, put my fingertips in the ridges on the surface of that boat, and just drag myself away about 4 feet before I pass out again. Now, passengers from that second boat risked their lives. Luckily, the water was still shallow. They came over and pulled me off the boat, and I'm grateful that they did because about 3 minutes after they got me off, the second fuel tank on that boat exploded, and I wouldn't have been here. Now, my wife Malika, she was thrown in a different direction into the ocean, and there happened to be another boat that picked her and one other passenger up and took them to shore. As they got me to shore, they put me on the back of a pickup truck in the backwoods of the Bahamas to take me to this clinic. And as they get me there, they put me on a stretcher and wheeled me into the clinic. And this is the first time I hear Malika, her moans, her agony, her suffering, the pain that she was going through at that moment. And I couldn't do anything about it. Long story short, they had one doctor at this clinic, and they told me that they were sending me and this other passenger to the good hospital, and that Malika would come later that day. They put me on an airplane, flew me to Nassau, put me through emergency surgery. I wake up, my left foot is pinned to my leg now, and as I wake up, I'm asking, "Where is Malika? Where is my wife?" Two doctors come in, they look at each other in confusion, and they leave out, and I'm thinking to myself, this is the most obvious question I could be asking them. And then after a couple of minutes, they come back and tell me, "Mr. Jackson, we hate to inform you, but your wife didn't make it. She died at that clinic." I had to, this was supposed to be a celebratory, momentous occasion, our 15th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
And just like that, my best friend, mother of my child, my rock, the person who I'm building my life around, is gone. Not to come to grips with that. I went
Wow.
to sleep that night thinking that this had to be a dream, this had to be a nightmare. But I wake up that next day in that hospital bed. And as I wake up that next morning, I realized I had to do something I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to do. That 12-year-old boy that I dropped off with his aunt and uncle, I had to call him on the phone and tell him, Mom and Dad went on this vacation, and Mom's never coming home again. And now having to hear the heartbreak that I'm having to convey to him is something that I never would want anybody to have to experience. And we talked about it, and he understood that mom was in heaven and gonna be an angel, but still the shock of the moment is still so
Yeah.
significant, so great. Later that same day, after talking to him, I'm laying in the bed and I can see there's an EKG monitor over my head. I see my vital signs starting to change. They tried to reattach my foot back to my leg, and my foot was infected, and the infection was starting to go through my body. And so over the course of a couple hours, I saw my vital signs go from green to yellow to red. And at that point, I was already coming to accept the fact that I no longer was going to be here, that my wife had already been taken from me, and it was a matter of time before I was going to go. They even stopped bringing the doctors in and started bringing priests just to pray over me.
Wow.
So I thought to myself that the next time I closed my eyes was going to be the last time I closed my eyes. Now, there's a lot of different things going on in the background there, and by the grace of God, I wake up the next morning and I'm basically confiscated from the Bahamas to a level 1 trauma center in Florida who saw what happened, and they were willing to do whatever they could to save my life. So after 9 surgeries in 5 days, including the amputation of my left leg, the pieces started to be put back together to me. And in the midst of that, and I'm a spiritual person, Grant, and God talks to me and gave me some clear messages, and he told me a couple of different things. As I was in the hospital and realizing the fact that I was still going to be around, he told me if I wanted to, I could have taken your life at 3 different times. Could have taken your life when that boat exploded. Could have taken your life when your vital signs went from green to yellow to red. I went through 5 surgeries in one day and very unstable. He told me he could have taken my life then. But he told me I had to get to a point of acceptance of the fact that the life that I had with Malika was no longer. That I had a different path, a different future, a different journey ahead. And that it was not going to be anything that I was expecting or knew it was going to be. He told me that I had to make a conscious choice, choose to be resilient, that I could either feel sorry for myself and struggle and suffer in life, or if I could make this choice, I could actually thrive and learn to do more than just survive. And he said that the obstacles I've overcome were nothing compared to what I was going to have to face. And then that last thing about making that choice to be resilient, he hit me with this, and I didn't understand it at the time, but resilience is not about regaining what was lost, but it's about reshaping what still remains. And it's what we do with what still remains that controls the narrative of our life story. So I still had a story. I had a reason to be hopeful, even though I didn't feel it in that moment. But that was the key. That was when the transformation of who Tiran Jackson 1.0 was to who Tiran Jackson 2.0 was to become actually started. And so that's where it all happened. I believe it or not, Grant, I ended up having to go through this miraculous physical recovery, emotionally having to be rebuilt, spiritual growth again to come back to trust, and then mentally. I was in and out of consciousness 5 times. I went 6 months where I had severe short-term memory loss, which means I could forget what we were talking about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And coming from an engineering background where I was counted on to remember and know specific details, identity-wise, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to function and move forward. But I realized that all of that was setting the foundation for the story that was to come, that was going to allow me to be able to help inspire and motivate others. And so,
Man, that's a lot. That's and insanely heavy and inspiring and real and thanks for sharing that, first of all. And I can't even begin to imagine what that was like, what that experience was. How long were you in the hospital in Florida?
so I was in the hospital in Florida for about 3 weeks before they discharged me. And when they discharged me, I was literally still broken. I'm still in a cast with my right foot, got my shoulder in a sling, got a back brace, all of these things. And the first step was to get me healed to a point where I could potentially use crutches again. They told me when I get a prosthetic, they said I'd be able to walk again, but it was going to take about 8 to 10 months, and I'd walk with the obvious limp more than likely. But that's where this whole thing about resilience truly kicked in. A lot of things were happening on my journey. Anyway, 3 months later, I was able to walk, and 6 months later, I ran my first 5K, and 8 months later, I learned how to swim with one leg and ran my first 10K. So I did a lot of
Sheesh.
amazing things that I wasn't thought that I would be able to do afterwards. But in the midst of going through that, when we start talking about what it means to develop the right discipline and consistent habits and having that right mindset and approach towards tackling your challenges and your obstacles. All of this were aspects of who I was becoming and what I needed to be in order to achieve goals beyond what I actually imagined and thought. Talk about what it's like to be obsessed and not let the distractions that can pull you away from doing what you need to do actually allow you to reach your goals in the way and manner that you should. And I was obsessed with making sure I could bounce back and get to a place where I could still be a father to my son and honor Malika's legacy and move in the path that it was meant for me to move in. And so,
Yeah.
so
How when, on the accident itself, the how many passengers were there? There were 10 passengers,
there were
including you
10
guys,
passengers on the boat, yes, 10 passengers on the boat.
and she was the only one that passed away.
She was the only casualty, yes.
Were everyone else as severely injured as you were?
There was one young lady who she actually had to have both of her legs amputated. She was sitting about 2 seats ahead of where Malika and I was. The other passengers were on the other side of the boat, so they didn't get the direct impact of the
Yeah.
explosion from the fuel tank that we were sitting above.
Unbelievable. So you're in the hospital for 3 weeks there, and then, like you said, even whenever you get back to Atlanta, like the amount of rehab that you got to go through, I assume not only just physically, but like you alluded to, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I don't even know like where do you even begin to start to put the pieces back together there, and just like how do you even just wake up and function, let alone think about like, all right, we're gonna build a life of resiliency. Like, was there a time there where at some point the switch flipped for you of going like, okay, I can't feel sorry for myself the rest of life. Like, I got a long road ahead of me, God willing, and I got a son who needs me, and this doesn't have to be something that's going to define me for the rest of my life in a negative way, but this could be, from a spiritual perspective, I know that God has a plan for me, and what the enemy tried to harm me with, God can use for good. So it's one of those things to like say all that, but for it
Yeah.
to click and be like, oh no, let's actually live that out. Was there a moment or a time where things started to switch around for you?
I say this, there were small moments where I could see that I was making progress. And for like the first 2 months after I was let out the hospital, I actually had to live with my sister and brother-in-law in Hendersonville, north of Nashville.
Yeah.
And they pretty much took care of me as I was starting to get to a little bit of recovery. I was doing some physical therapy actually at their house. I was being pushed in a wheelchair all the time. But I was realizing that as I was continuing to, do little things that seem insignificant, but I had to take a 2 pound dumbbell and just like go back and forth like this. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to treat that like it was the most important thing in my life at that point in time because it was. Now, by having a strong support system, my son was being taken care of by family, and they were making sure that he was okay. And so I treated that physical therapy like it was the most critical thing. But as I was starting to see that I could move a little bit, it was like a victory, a win to me. And I'm like, okay, this is a step. We finally got to a place where I could use crutches, and we moved back to Atlanta. And I started doing grief counseling and therapy because I knew I hadn't dealt with anything like that before.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety, survivor's remorse, the PTSD, all of these were things that I couldn't deal with. I lived a pretty steady, stable life as an engineering manager,
Yeah.
and dealing with the adversity that I was used to dealing with then was nothing compared to this. But part of it was truly being focused on what was important and critical for me to take that next step forward, either emotionally, spiritually, and really having to deal with, okay, how am I going to, help my son, because he was dealing with the emotional loss of losing his mother, and his hurt both of it was pain that we had, but his pain was different than mine.
Yeah.
So making sure that we were doing those things, and along those lines, it did lead to me doing a lot of journaling, a lot of reflecting on the life that Malika and I had and what happened, but also getting more clarity on this is my situation, these are my circumstances, what am I going to do to move forward? So taking ownership of my life became more critical then than any point in time before. But being aware of that led to me taking some of the right actions that helped, like I said, create the person that I am now and give me that steady momentum to move forward from that setback.
At what point did speaking kind of enter the landscape of like, oh, this is a possibility, because again, if I'm, again, I've never experienced anything near what you've described there, and most people haven't, and so the idea of, okay, on one hand, I could see, yeah, this is a powerful story. People want to hear the story of resiliency. On the other, if I'm you, I'm just like, yeah, I really don't want to keep retelling about the worst day of my life and tell, thousands of people that day after day after day. Like that also sounds like traumatic.
Yeah,
So how did speaking come on the radar for you? And are you thinking like, this sounds like an awful idea?
so here it's interesting how it all happened. One of my best friends, he was a regional director for New York Life, a life insurance company, and they were having a conference. This was probably about 8 or 9 months after the incident. Now, at this point in time, I'm still not to a place where I can uh, get in front of people and really share. Keep in mind, I was an introverted engineer, didn't really like talking to people, didn't really want to be in front of people. But he asked if I would be open just to share my perspective and my story towards being relatively young and losing my spouse. And I
Yeah.
was so nervous. I was like, this is not what I do. But I was like, I will do something. And I wrote this whole speech together, and I thought that it was going to be, like I said, I was afraid, nervous, but I went to the conference.
How long? How long after the accident was
This
this?
was about 9 months after the
Okay.
incident. So
Okay.
at that point in time, I was starting to move a little bit. I was starting to feel a little bit better. Physically, I was able to walk and be on the stage and all. And so I got up there and I started trying to remember everything that I put together and all. And about 4 or 5 minutes into it, I scrapped what I had, spoke from the heart. And I say this now. That was the worst talk I think I've ever given. And so when I look back on it and some of the things I've done now, some of the places I'm speaking, and just how I've grown over time, I say that one was definitely one of the lowest. But at the end of it, people came up to me and said, "You have changed the way that I look at life, and you have changed."
Wow.
And as a result of it, I got asked to come back and speak at another conference like 2 months later. And
Yeah.
then and that one was a little bit better, but it was garbage, Grant. It wasn't great. And so, but at the end of that one, somebody asked me again, would I come and speak to one in North Carolina? And at
Mm-hmm.
that time, they actually offered to pay me to come and do it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
when I thought to myself, well, maybe this might be something I'm supposed to be looking at doing. And that's when actually the idea of taking speaking seriously started to register and click. And that's sort of what led me into the speaker lab.
Now, whenever you did that first gig, today you can look back on it and be like, that was a disaster. I should not have done that. But at the time, do you remember thinking the same thing, or was it more of, I did that, it was rough, but okay, there's something there. What do you remember what you were thinking at the time?
Look, I thought I was great. I thought I did
Yeah,
a good
yeah,
job. But there are certain elements as a speaker now. It's certain things certain points I want to make sure that I touch on. Certain elements that's going to pull that emotional
yeah,
aspect into just the way that we construct things now and the way that I deliver it was nothing like it was then.
yeah.
And I mean, it's a powerful story. It's a traumatic story. I was crying on stage. I understand that I got to keep it together to a certain extent to be able to actually get my point across. And
Mm-hmm.
to be able to, I shouldn't be having therapy on stage. And that's sort of what it was. But it did impact people, and it gave me something that gave me a little bit of confidence that, okay, well, maybe I can do this again. And so, with the repetitions and with the actually learning the tools, the aspect, when you talk about your speak framework,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how to prepare for the talk,
Yeah.
and some of these things, it started to be something that I was actually, okay, if I'm going to do this, let me do it at a high level and let
Yeah.
me make it better and not just somebody who is, telling their sob story in front of a bunch of people and how they
Yeah.
felt. So
Did you so at the time, like how long after the accident did you go back to work as an engineer?
I never went back to work as an engineer. One of the things, and I didn't mention this, but when I was in the hospital bed in the Bahamas, God told me, you're not going to go back to being an engineer again.
Wow.
So, that was one of those things where it's like, this is what I know, this is what I do.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, Grant, I like to, when I do my talks, I weave in my technical engineering brain with the vulnerable, authentic, emotionally aware side of who I am now. And it's an interesting dynamic when I communicate to people to be able to take that structure and also the emotional side and be able to provide that as a means of being able to get through to others.
Wow. Amazing. All right. So again, you do that first gig for a friend, and that kind of leads to another one, to another one, to another one. You're starting to think like, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe I can continue to help people, and maybe this is a bigger purpose, a higher calling of being able to share this horrible tragedy with other people and provide a story of resilience. It's one thing to like think that, but where do you go from there? Of going, yeah, I guess I just sit and I wait for people to keep calling me, and that's worked up until a point. But like at some point, that probably doesn't work. It's not a great strategy from a business perspective to just like sit and wait. So where do you go from there?
So this goes back to, like I said, this is where the engineering mindset comes in. I understand if you're not good at something, the best thing you can do is have a process for improvement. And so I knew that there has to be some way that I could learn how to do this and how to do it better, and then to make this into essentially a profession. And even though it wasn't what I was initially looking for, but to be able to systemize it in a way where I can get the right opportunities. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what led me into looking at it a little bit deeper into how do I become great at this, when I know that, you know, I have a message, I have a story, and I have insight that is inherent to my experiences that can help other people.
Mm.
So at that point, that's where I was thinking, okay, I need to find the right type of coaching. I need to find the right type of steps in order to get me from where it's just a concept or an idea to something that I can implement and execute upon. So,
Yeah. And where do you go from there? Like, because again, like all that sounds good. All right, this engineer of mine's telling me like I got to do more than just like sit and wait. But where do you go from there?
well, that's where looking online for different opportunities came up, and that's when I ran into the Speaker Lab, and I said, okay, well, okay, this is somebody, Grant Baldwin, who is helping people learn how to be able to speak. And like I said, if it's broken down in a process, I feel like, okay, if I just follow the process, it's going to get me to places where I want to get to. Now that, and then the other part of it too is I started realizing I needed to be around people who understood. And at the time, I didn't know anything about National Speakers Association, NSA. That's a group that I do a lot with now.
Yeah.
But I realized that, okay, I need to be around other people who are speaking professionally and figure out if this is something I seriously want to do, or is it something that I really want to grow and develop in. So the combination of those led me to, like you said, not just going to where, okay, I've got this story and this talk, but learning how to be able to leverage and use it and position it in a way where if I'm presenting to a faith-based organization, or if
Yeah.
I'm presenting to an athletic department, that there are certain elements that would make it bring value to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where learning how to, create a killer talk and to be able to know how to be able to do it and do it at a high level, work on the stage craft, worked on all the elements. I got some of that through other places, but the Speaker Lab went into detail about that. And then creating the pipeline, creating the means of being able to find the right people, my niche, my target audience, connecting with them, and then being able to turn that into speaking opportunities was where my time, focus, and efforts went. And so that's how it happened.
Yeah, I want to go back also to because you kind of mentioned at the beginning that early on for you, it's going like I have this story that's a crazy story, and it seems like people are resonating with it and they want to hear it, but I don't know like who do I speak to, what do I speak about, how do I kind of connect the dots here? Kind of talk us through that of how did you figure out what that message was beyond just I'm just going to get on stage and tell my story.
Well, part of it was I had a friend of mine who was a business coach, and one of the things when I talked to him in regards to, I have all of these ideas, I have things that I have in mind, but the question is, okay, well, how are you going to help people? What is the process? And how did what you go through, how would that change other people's lives?
Hmm.
One thing to give hope and inspiration, but can you give them a methodology, a process, an approach that they can use, even though, not a lot of people are going to go through what I went through.
Yeah.
But there's a way to be able to structure your mind, your approach, your attitude to be able to not let whatever knocks you down keep you down.
Yeah.
So when I got deeper into what it truly meant to be resilient and realized that we are all going through challenges all the time, Grant. And as
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, there's ups and downs. As parents, you're going to have different times with your kids that are going to be better than others with just what we're dealing with in life as a whole. But one thing that will make you better suited towards being able to deal with that is if you got a resilient mindset to know that whatever you're going through, what is the lesson I'm going to get out of it, and how is it going to make me better? Where's the positive growth going to come from here? That is a message that's transferable to pretty much anybody in any space.
Yeah.
We don't talk to everybody, but when we make that specific for a certain group or certain organization, then we are speaking to them, and that's what I've learned as far as one of the secrets in order to be able to keep going in this path.
You touched on it earlier as well, but you spoke to one of the NFL teams. Who'd you speak to, and how'd you get that gig? There's only, 30, 32 teams, and so there's not a lot of gigs there. Talk to us about that. That sounds cool.
So I had the opportunity to speak for the Las Vegas Raiders in one of their training camp opportunities, and this is something that I've been working on for some time because I realized. So just to give a little bit of backstory here, I told you I went through amputation. Years before that, I went through where I tore my MCL, PCL in my knee, my patella tendon. A couple years before that, I went through an Achilles tear. And so I had to go through these physical recoveries to heal from certain injuries that ultimately prepared my mindset for what I was going to have to go through to get back together. So when I went through having to go through the physical therapy of learning to walk again with a prosthetic, I had been somewhat through it before.
Yeah.
So what I realized is, okay, well, you got these world-class athletes that go through these injuries and do what they have to, and if you don't have the right mindset towards that, then maybe you'll struggle to recover from it. So anyway, long story short, I thought, okay, well, let me see what happens if I try to reach out to some of the people in this space. This is an audience. I had a vision, a dream, and I have a message. Everywhere you got in life, your mind got there first.
Hmm.
I wanted to, if I wanted to be in front of this audience, this crowd, I had to visualize what it was going to be like and how I was going to be there. And so, my thought was, if I want to speak in front of these world-class athletes as a potential target audience, let me take the steps to get there. So I found the ways to contact some of the right people within the player engagement spaces, and this was a relationship. I had to work on their relationship for a while, but after they got back in contact with me and we started talking about how my story would benefit their athletes, it
Hmm.
was one that it was like, okay, we got to find the right time, the right placement, the right opportunity. And so it came together after about a year and a half. And, at this moment, I've got 4 other NFL teams that I'm working on some things with right now as a
That's
result
cool.
of getting that opportunity. So it wasn't just the exposure, but the just that right market, tapping into that market has opened up doors for others.
But one of the things I think I really resonate and like about that is so often like we see like kind of the sexiness of speaking to an NFL team, and so it's just like we're just trying to get this gig, and it becomes very transactional. Whereas for you, you had mentioned like you had a long-term mentality with this. I'm going to build a relationship with the player engagement director over the course of a couple years, and figuring out how we can best work together, what that might look like, until ultimately, it all worked out. And then now, since then, you've got other teams that are interested. But having like again a long-term mentality of sticking with it, of following up, of planting seeds, building relationships, like those are the things that matter, that move the needle in the speaking business. It's just hard. It's just like, from like an athletic perspective, it's the um, an NFL player who's like they're spending an extra time in the weight room, they're doing one extra set, they're doing one extra rep, they're doing that drill one more time, and like nobody sees that, nobody sees the seeds that you're planting, the follow up that you're doing, the work that you're putting in there, but like that's the stuff that matters in terms of building the relationships that ultimately with that get you booked gigs and help you to share your message with others.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree, and I think that that's one of the things I tell other speakers who I talk to nowadays, that the non-sexy stuff, the things that you just got to be discipline and consistency, doing those things with the outreach on a regular basis and finding the right people,
Yeah.
narrowing that down to the specific groups of individuals who your message is tailored for is one of the hardest things. But once you have it, and once you're able to see a little bit of success with getting into those groups, then you're going to realize that now the groups are going to work for you.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
player engagement director for the Raiders started talking and sharing to other teams about how I impacted their team of athletes, their professional football players.
Yeah.
So but it isn't cute when I know I'm going to spend 2 hours today, researching the right people and crafting my email messages
Yeah.
and making sure that outreach is going to happen. But that's the work that's going to make for the opportunities to be on those stages and
Yeah.
be in front of those groups truly come to fruition.
Wow, that's so cool. The okay, now for someone who may be hearing your story, listening to your story, here's how I felt early on. Is like years ago I was interested in speaking and I didn't know squat about speaking, but I knew I wanted to do it, and I felt like in order to be a speaker, you had to have some crazy story that you've overcome, right? And I remember there's a good buddy of mine who he had cancer as a child, had a leg amputated, and went on to become a one-legged skier in the Paralympics. And I'm hearing that story, and I'm just like, I can't compete with that, Like there's no chance that I have anything anywhere remotely close to that. And so when I would hear about his story, when I would hear about your story, the cynical side of me thinks like, oh man, I don't have anything like that. Like I'm just a normal dude, who's had a pretty normal average life. And so there are plenty of speakers right now who may be thinking the same thing. Like I don't have some crazy overcoming obstacle story. I want to be a speaker. I want to have the kind of platform that Tiran has, but I don't have some type of story. What would you say to that speaker?
I would say you have to understand the value that you do have, that you do bring. What is unique about you that's going to be able to help others? Everybody is not necessarily going to be my audience or going to resonate with the extreme of what I've went through. But if you do have some expertise in an area and can find other, there's a lot of regular guys out there, regular people. So
Yeah.
they are going to connect with regular people who have, you know, experience similar aspects of things. And so along those lines, some of the stories that you may have that might not be outlandish will connect with the right people if
Yeah.
you position yourself properly with it. Now, I think that there is a certain level of expertise that we have to show because
Mm-hmm.
everybody who just has any random story without any substance behind it probably isn't the best person to be speaking. But if you know that you're bringing value and that it'll change and can be very, very specific on who those people, who your story is going to impact the most, or who your message or the information that you provide is really going to take them up to that next level, then I think there's a place to speak for you. You just um, got to be diligent in finding that
Yeah.
magic that works for you.
Yeah, very well said. Let's wrap up with this. You obviously have an incredible message and story and testimony of resilience. And building a business as a speaker requires an enormous amount of resilience. And again, days where you just feel like, woo, we doing the thing. I got booked. This is awesome. And days where you're like, this is ridiculous. What am I doing? And my guess would be that even for you and your story, there were times of rehab and recovery of going like, I can't wait to tell my story. I can't. This is gonna be an awesome part of my story. And other days you're like, what? I just need to go back to being an engineer. This is ridiculous to think I should even chase some type of story right now, or chase some type of like speaking career. So for the speaker who's listening and thinking like, I want to do this, but it's just hard. It's just tough. Give us that motivational Pastor Tiran, give us something here to preach to the people in the back who are just needing a little dose of inspiration when it comes to resiliency.
Look, it's all about belief. What do you believe in yourself? If you believe that you can do this, make sure, and I'm a realist. I understand that everybody may not have the right amount of time to put 6 hours into research and outreach. If you can do 30 minutes, be committed to doing that each day. Be committed to doing a little bit each day to refine your message, to be able to find, do what's necessary to get you noticed. That goes back to the website and the demo on those things. You can work on the copy for those things and how to create something that'll make it easier for the right people to be able to find you and connect with you.
Yeah.
But don't get to the point where you just say, okay, well, forget it. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. I can't do all of that. Well, just take one small bite and do it for a lot of days consistently, and you will
Yeah.
make progress. And then what's going to happen is the first time that you get that response, that first time that you get somebody to say, okay, here's your check for what you've done for us.
Mm-hmm.
The light bulb is gonna go off, and it's gonna be like, okay, let me go find that next time.
Let's go.
I've seen success. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that it is a task, it is labor, but I'm sure we've all seen the meme where they show the guys who are taking the pickaxe
Yeah, that's what I was
and
thinking.
digging.
The
And
gold. Yeah.
you just keep going a little bit further, you're going to find that goal. But if you stop before there, you're not going to be able to reach it. And so just understand that, yeah, it's gonna be draining. It's gonna be stressful. There's gonna be times where you're gonna question why are you doing it. But if you're committed, if you're dedicated, and then the other part of it too is, if you're truly driven to make an impact on others, you're depriving them. You're taking something away if you're not giving your value, your expertise that could potentially change their life. That was bigger than you.
So good, so good. So again, I think it's such an inspiration, not just from the story itself and what you've overcome personally, but even what you've done with your speaking business. In the matter of just a couple of years of going from never really sharing your story, never really talking at all about this, to a point where you're doing 60, 70, 80 gigs per year. You're getting paid for this, getting paid really well, and doing, like, you're all in on this. This is a full-time thing for you. So let that be an inspiration to other people. Before we wrap up, one other quick total side note here. Give us an update. How's your son doing through all this?
My son is doing great. My son, he is 19 now. He graduated from high school last year.
Nice.
One of the most emotionally aware and strong young men. And when you say that about an 18, 19-year-old, sort of like oxymoron.
Yeah.
But he actually has dealt with adversity and a lot of change and has become a stronger person for it. Right now, he is doing a lot of different things, trying to figure out exactly what he wants to do in the world. He talked about going to college right away, but we were like, okay, figure out more so what you want to do. So he is doing his thing, but look, he is emotionally great. He's feeling good. He played football for years through high school, and is just a great kid all
That's
around. I'm
cool.
grateful for him being able to hang in there and get through. But he naturally gets resilience from his dad, or at least I try to tell him that now. But no, he's
Yeah.
doing wonderful. He's doing wonderful.
Hey, man, beautiful story. Thanks again for taking the time to share that. If people want to find out more about you, what you're up to, where can we find you?
So my platform is called Reborn Resilient, where I help those who have gone through some level of trauma, tragedy, or transition make the transformation to be triumphant again. We're all going to go through our adversity and need to get past it. If you're looking for some coaching or some help along those lines, or a message to help inspire and motivate your people, go to rebornresilient.com, or you can find me on all the socials under Tiran Jackson or Tiran Jackson Official.
Awesome. Tyran, hey, I know this is like the first time that you and I have interacted, but let me just say, like, you have such a joy about you, such a humility, and such a contagiousness about what you're bringing, just an energy for someone who has been through what you've been through. It is this has been very inspiring and refreshing, and so, man, we really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you guys letting me be a part, and for all the value. I'm going to say this, Grant. You provide so much value for those who are looking to learn how to be able to take this concept of speaking and making it a reality. And so I'm honored to be able to get the chance to be a part of this and just to, be another example of someone who is taking some of what you created and taught people and be successful with it. So
Thanks
thank
for
you.
the kind words, man. I appreciate that. But ultimately, like, you got to do the work, and you've done the work, and you're seeing the results of that. So, congrats, man. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.